my good friend, my frequent broadcast partner, and your favorite co-host has returned to the band, Michelle Joy Phelps. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hey. Oh, it feels great to be back to kind of normal. Like, it's been a horrific experience going through, what many people, unfortunately, today are going through. I just happened to kind of get a snippet of what people are dealing with in the hospitals. So it's been a journey. Today is, I think, day 16. Even though the test results have proven to be negative for COVID, thank God, when we go back to the symptoms of day one, it started off just like everyone said it would. It was a sore throat. Didn't think much of it. She's using one of those sprays, cough drops, and honestly was nothing concerning at all. And because, in the midst of all of this, this entire pandemic, people are still just having regular colds and flus and other issues going on. It's not just the virus that's taken over. It's like we're still dealing with the other norms. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. I didn't think anything of it. And then it wasn't until the second day that I had the sharpest pain in my back on both sides. It felt like somebody gave me a good body shot. It was just very painful. And I remember calling my mom and I remember asking her, like, I don't know what this is, but it hurts really bad. And she's like, well, that's your lungs. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm fine. And she's like, but that's your lungs.
See, by now, I'd already be thinking, is that you, Rona? Like, if I have so much as a hiccup, I start looking for all the other symptoms. So at this time, you're still chill. You're like, I'm good.
At the end of the day, I was just like, why am I having such bad back pain? So then it wasn't until the following morning, which was day 3, where I woke up with literally like that overnight, and I had a cough, a bronchial cough. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Like, there was no sign of a cough the day before, like not even a tickle in the throat. So I had no idea what was going on. And all of a sudden I'm just coughing up. I have fever. I'm like, no way. This isn't happening. So I called 111, which is here in England. It's the NHS.
And that's where, for Americans, that's when they actually come. Like in England, if you dial their 911, the police do show up at some time soon. That's just for those in LA and living in the hood that don't know that the emergency actually gets attended to in other countries.
Yeah, so I called 111. I told them what was going on. They told me to self-isolate. Right now you're showing symptoms of what appears to be signs of the coronavirus. So, of course, naturally, I mean, when you're sick to begin with, whether it be the cold or the flu, you just want to put your head down and sleep, don't you? So I was just doing what I normally would do. I was taking paracetamol, which is like equivalent to our Tylenol. I was just doing whatever I needed to do at this point and respecting, I didn't go anywhere. Thankfully, my roommate was around to go re-up on my medications when I needed it. And because my back pain was so severe, and now I'm coughing and I just it's hard for me to breathe because, as you know, when you're asthmatic, it's a whole new ball game. It's challenging. You can't lay to your left. You can't lay to your right. You can't lay on your back. I couldn't lay on my stomach because I had sciatic nerve now. My sciatic nerve flared for 5 days. I was in hell, okay? When I say hell, I mean the sciatic nerve took over so much so that I didn't even feel my back, like the lung pain anymore. So I couldn't sleep. I was completely restless. My body, I felt like I was getting worse because my body was incapable of resting. And when you're sick, that's what your body wants to do. It wants
Who's taking care of you at this point? You say you have a roommate. Is she coming in the room, massaging your back, putting oils on your shoulders, cooking you noodle soup?
I was going to allow her to come in the room. She wouldn't anyways, and we were very respectful of this social distancing thing that, you know, was encouraged. And I really just, she would leave medication outside of my door. And the only time I would leave my room was to go to the kitchen to make like soup or something of that, you know, just to kind of feed myself. So it wasn't until about 7 or 8 days in where my sciatic nerve actually calmed. And now I'm feeling my back pain again. My fever started to reduce. And I was feeling, honestly, better. I was feeling like, okay, now I could sleep a little bit. I was a bit sore from the sciatic nerve. Anyone who's ever suffered from it understands. It's like your body takes a beating, and then it's like working out. Like you do one good workout, and then a few days later, you're still a bit sore. Your body aches. So my body was aching a bit, but the fever had passed now. I've been checking my temperature every day, and it had passed. So it was on day 11, and it's funny because I woke up that morning and I genuinely felt like, I think I feel a bit better today. And I remember doing a post on Instagram, my first post for like in 11 days. And I said, today's plans is from the window to the wall. Right? So I did that. And about an hour later, I couldn't breathe. And it got to the point where it actually scared me because, you know, again, I've had asthma my entire life. I was born premature and my lungs are underdeveloped. So I have always struggled with it. I mean, I was the kid in school that never had to do PE. Like I passed PE for, you know, all the way through high school because I wasn't allowed to go running or do normal things like normal kids. And so for that reason, I did finally call them. It took them 2 hours to show up. Okay. Because they were apparently really busy. And I got brought in and all these tests were done on me, and I was in a room and they did an x-ray and they did blood work and it showed irregular. So the doctor was like, we have to admit you and now we have to swab you. It's because the tests that we've taken up until this point, you know, basically back the virus. We have to test you. So I'm like, okay. They swab me, and then I get put into a ward. Now, the ward was with me and 5 other women, and it was a room, just a solid room of curtains. So there was a restroom.
5 other women?
5 other women with respiratory issues, all in this room.
So is this like a condo with 5 different rooms, and then like a shared living room where you guys all watch like Sex in the City?
We were definitely we were separated by a sheet, and there were no restrooms in that room, so we were subjected to use the restroom in a pan, which a nurse would come and collect, and no running water unless we requested it, so that we could like try to bathe ourselves and stuff, and this was what they called the isolation ward, which was we were not allowed to leave that room until our test results were back, whether that be positive or negative. And
there's a lot of isolation between you and the other 4 women. You're telling me you're getting your bodily functions handled between a thin curtain of separation in an open air room?
Yeah.
What was their explanation for this? Like, why is there especially if you don't know who has it, who doesn't? Why is this a situation? Was the hospital like jam packed where there's nowhere for any place else to be?
I don't know. I didn't see anything beyond where I was. All I know is it was 3 days of absolutely no sleep, because when you have 5 other people dealing with other issues, and we were talking about chronic coughing in the rooms, and it just, you know, people are constantly getting different treatments done and so forth. So it was a very harrowing experience. Like, I could feel for people. I mean, you got to understand, like, there is that concern of if I was negative, if someone else tested positive, what does that mean exactly for the room, for all of us? But I mean, one thing I will say was the hospital I was at, the nurses were, bar none, the best nurses I've ever come across. For whatever reason, it seemed like we all got the tests back at the same time, so we all might have been admitted at the same evening. I mean, I don't know. I just know that they came in and they were like, you know, you tested negative, and I'm like, oh, great. So now what? And they moved us from isolation ward into a normal ward. Now that they know that none of us were carrying the virus, we were safe to kind of go back out into the general population and heal that way, because each of us obviously was there for different reasons.
We would be remiss if we did not talk about what is also happening. Talk to me about that. What did you unearth during that portion of your experience?
I am going home. I'm flying back to Los Angeles this weekend, and my mom said, upon you coming home, we have papers that we need you to fill out, which is insurance forms that should I die overseas at any given point, that they can have my body released to me. And she said one of her biggest fears was that because she doesn't have any sort of documentation on me, and because of the travel restrictions, she would have possibly have never been able to say goodbye. And that was a real reality check. Like, damn, like, even though I don't have it, she had a really a valid point, you know, that there are a lot of people who are losing loved ones overseas, and because of the travel restrictions, you're not capable of going and claiming their bodies and taking them home.
Well, I mean, I'm hunkered down at home as I'm supposed to, but I got to go out to get groceries occasionally for my mom. You know, there are certain errands that must be run. I walk occasionally to keep, like I said, my exercise up to par and stay away from people, give the 6 feet distance. But they were telling us masks won't protect you. And I'm looking at all these people wearing these masks for the past month like idiots, like overkill. Like, you guys are looking for attention, or you guys are really, you're selling this hard. You know what I mean? And now all of a sudden, they're telling me I'm supposed to wear a mask every time I leave the house. So, which is true? Did something change? Why masks today and not yesterday?
Before I speak on anything, I encourage everyone to go out and do their own research. Do not believe what you see on the news and take it as gospel. You have to figure it out for yourself. I heard that now, if any person is to die from a car accident, a heart attack, anything other than just the virus, right? But they had the virus in their system, they are now being a part of the number of COVID deaths. They are marking it as a COVID death if you have it in your system, even if you didn't die from it.
That is a staggering bit of information, because that will, by definition, inflate the numbers of casualties due to this virus. So the explanation that I read, and of course this would not apply to something like a car accident, but more so to something like a heart attack or a stroke, heart failure, a situation like that, your lungs collapsing and you die, pneumonia, for instance, would be a result of the presence of this virus in your system. And so you may not, technically you could argue this person died of pneumonia or this person had a heart attack, but would they have had a heart attack, or would the pneumonia have onset had they not had the virus, right? And so that is how, at least what I read, they were justifying classifications of corona deaths through other causes of death that they don't think would have been present to cause death had the virus not been present in the system. I don't think you can use that explanation for getting hit by a bus.
If someone died of a car accident, a heart attack, but if they had the flu at that time, it would not be considered a flu death. And this comes from the National Institute of Health, okay? This is just a few days ago. On re-evaluation by the National Institute of Health, only 12% of death certificates have shown a direct casualty from coronavirus. And this is Professor Ricciardi, scientific advisor to Italy Health Minister. So he's saying that only 12% of the deaths that have been reported have actually been because of the virus. I encourage people to look that up themselves. Don't take what I say as gospel, nor what someone else tweets and has retweeted 50,000 times. What's scary is we're hearing these high numbers, and I thought it to be quite reckless to hear that we're adding to that death toll to things that actually didn't directly die from the virus itself, or they didn't die directly from the virus. So I had heard that, and it's everywhere for people, obviously in the UK, we don't have CBS here. Again, go research it yourself. They have publicly apologized for this, calling it a big mistake. And what they did was they were saying that Queen's Hospital was something of an apocalypse. Like there were just bodies everywhere. People were sick, ambulances everywhere. And it turns out that people who live in Queens were like, that's interesting. I live right across the street from the hospital, and it doesn't look like that. Well, it turns out that they ran footage from an Italy hospital showing a full Italy hospital and said it was Queens in New York, the Queens Hospital in New York. And that was not the truth. So they got called out on it and said, oh my God, we're so sorry, we made such a big mistake. So again, that's scary, because what if they didn't catch that and people thought that was what the New York City hospital looked like? And it wasn't. It was clearly not New York at all. It was a completely different country.
Granted, at that level of news reporting, I would imagine that a story like that should be more vigorously vetted. But I will tell you that even on YouTube, I am held to a much higher standard sometimes than I think appropriate. Sometimes we make mistakes, guys. But you people don't let us get away with anything, especially mispronouncing foreigners' names. But we'll discuss that another time. If a news agency like that makes such a huge blunder, it is only going to give rise to a ton of conspiratorial theories about why that happened, whether or not it was actually a mistake, whether or not this is something that is being engaged in on purpose to mislead people. And sprouting from the incident that you're talking about was a very popular hashtag on Twitter called Film Your Hospital. So all we know is that people are uploading footage onto Twitter from somewhere of these very empty, vacant hospitals, while the news media is claiming that these hospitals are air quote war zones and being incredibly trafficked people.
You gotta understand, hospitals are already busy to begin with, aren't they? I would never really say a hospital's dead, like there's no one in there. I mean, every hospital I've ever been in prior to this pandemic, the doctors and nurses and aides, everyone's always been quite busy. So when you throw into the equation everybody who's feeling like, oh my God, I got a cough, I got to go to the hospital now because I think I might have it, you're talking about a surge of people who are paranoid. And when they go in, they're overwhelming these physicians and it becomes a bit overwhelming for them. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's a surge in people having it. It just means that people are scared. And I think that's something that, again, back to really learning to educate yourself and stop taking what you see in the news as gospel, is really kind of understanding what the real issues are here. And a lot of people who are passing away from other things like heart attacks, pneumonia, which have no COVID, any other sort of respiratory issues, like all the other women that I was in the hospital with, or in the isolation ward with, we all had respiratory issues, but we were all cleared. I was in the hospital waiting to be cleared, basically. And then once I was cleared, I was moved into a different ward. imagine like how many people they have to deal with that on a daily basis who just have the flu or just have a cold, and because of that, or just have asthma. In my case, I had a lung infection, and they're having to work around the clock making sure that you guys are looked after because you don't know what the possibilities are. My mom works for a company now that is actually making the swabs that will now give you a positive result within 5 minutes and a negative result in 13 minutes. So within 15 minutes, you're going to know whether or not you have it, which is what we needed. We need that because hospitals do, or doctors do need that quick, results, instead of housing everybody into a room. God forbid one person come up positive in that room, and then what happens? The other 5 people got to stay too?
Had you not had a different diagnosis, survived it, thank God, and had a test that said you were negative, no one could have convinced me that Michelle Joy Phelps didn't just survive the RONA.
I mean, to be fair, I had a few different medical officials say to me that usually what happens when you are positive is the first week you don't even know you have it, and then the second week is when you get the symptoms. Well, given that I went into the hospital by day 11 and I had an infection in my lungs, it was like those 2 people said, it's possible you could have just passed it, like not passed it on, but like passed it, like it's out of your system now because there's no test that proves that you had it. But I wouldn't have gotten better if I didn't have their help. So, right. And I would never, mind you, I was supposed to fly back to Los Angeles on March 30th, and I didn't. I had about a week before that, I had to reschedule because I called Virgin Atlantic and I told them that I am showing symptoms of something. I'm sick and I'm not going to put myself on a plane, so I need to reschedule. They did a fantastic job by rescheduling me. And then I scheduled it out to mid-April. But the moment I got that negative test and they're like, oh, it's just your lungs and your asthma, I'm like, I'm out of here, man. I called Virgin again and I got the soonest flight out, and I'm glad I did because it turns out every day the laws are changing and they only had very few flights going back to Los Angeles at this point, and that was it. It was done. So it was like a blessing in disguise that I went into the hospital, because had I not had that form that says I'm COVID negative, then I would have been stuck in England until this was all over.
Here's a question, because there's a lot about the travel. Is it the only way you can get on the plane, or do you just not have to be coughing and sweating?
I actually don't know. I just know that when I called and I spoke to the representative, he said that form with you indicating that you're negative is as important as your passport at this point. I don't know. I just know that when I went to go pick my seats on the flight, it was a free-for-all. So I don't know if it's just me and the stewardess and the pilot going home at this point. I don't know. I'm so grateful to be able to go home with the security of knowing, like, I'm not infected, but I'm able to just go home and see my family, because obviously, I don't live in California. So, of course, I'm still going to take the precautions necessary. I've already said to my father that upon me coming home, I just need you to leave clean clothes in the garage and open the garage. I'm going to walk in, change out of my clothes, throw it into the washer, go into the house, shower, and then I can see my family. Just because, I am going through a journey to get back, and I just want to make sure that, I'm doing everything I can to ensure their safety, because ultimately that's all I care about, is making sure that that I'm not a liability to somebody.
Kai wants to know if boxing's finished for the year and if people will still be wanting to attend social gatherings. Listen, I don't have a social life, so if boxing is finished for the year, that's a no-no, okay? There's nowhere else where I will be accepted other than the boxing world with you knuckle draggers. I don't have any idea if boxing is finished this year, but I hope and pray every day that is not. It's something that I think is an essential sport. If there's only one sport that can come back, it should be boxing. It's the most global sport. It's the most essential of all sports. And it's the one that we all get to participate in. And I'll tell you what, if we don't have some on TV pretty soon, we're going to have a whole lot in the living rooms. So I consider this a safety sport just to keep everybody healthy and everybody's jaws intact.
Yeah, I don't know. I hope not. I mean, I don't know how I'm actually more concerned about the long-term effects on people, depression, anxiety, overall, like being the feeling of being introverted and not having the freedom to just go to the cafe or just go to the movies or do something, or go to the gym for that matter. A lot of people go to the gym because it's good for their mental health. I know that I personally go to the gym because it's great for my mental health. So I'm more concerned about the long-term effects of this than anything at all, because people cannot go on like this. I don't even think another month or so.
When you mentioned the gym, I gotta say, a single teardrop fell. There's no question that my mental health has been impacted by my inability to engage in the community that I have been a part of for the better side of 20 years in one way or another. We might have a difficult time managing, to be fair. I don't know that the boxing fan, and certainly the fanatics and those of us who cover the sport and participate in it, are normal people.
Rahim,
I think we need this.
Let's be real. The average person doesn't have a savings account. The average person doesn't have the means to get through a month, let alone 2, 3, 4, 6 months financially. What's going to happen? We're all going to end up in severe debt. Yeah, they'll extend rent, or you can't get evicted, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to pay back those months that you were sitting in your house. And how are you supposed to do that when you're accumulating debt and the average person is already living paycheck to paycheck? What does this do long term to people?